Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are, and welcome to this webinar, How to Engage, Recognize, Communicate, and Measure the 4 Pillars of Safety. This event, brought to you by ISHN Magazine, is sponsored by All-Star Incentive Marketing. I'm your moderator, Dave Johnson, editor of ISHN, and I thank you for joining us today. Today, our presenter is Brian Galanik. Mr. Galanik is president of All-Star Incentive Marketing and a member of the American Society of Safety Engineers. He is only one of 35 certified professionals of incentive marketing, and he's the former president of the Incentive Technology Council. All-Star Incentive Marketing is a 40-plus-year-old company, one of the nation's top suppliers of safety recognition and rewards programs, and a past winner of the IMA Circle of Excellence Award for Best Safety Incentive Program. Now, before we begin Brian's presentation, I want to provide you with just a few housekeeping items. Please note at the bottom of your screen you will see a taskbar. Each icon on the taskbar is assigned to a particular element of today's webinar. If you are unsure about what an icon does, hover over this icon with your mouse and a box will pop up that tells you the function. A copy of Brian's presentation is located in the handouts icon. Today's presentation may be eligible for 1 hour of ABIH, that's the American Board of Industrial Hygiene, CIH, and ABIH CM credits. See the ABIH website for their CM credit criteria. To receive the credit or certificate of completion for today's webinar, please take the quiz located in the handouts icon. Please take our survey following the webinar by clicking on the survey icon in the taskbar. Below Brian's photo, which you'll soon see, there's a blank questions box that allows you to type a question in the box and then hit the submit button to send it to us. Later in our live program, Brian will address as many questions as time permits. Brian's event is being recorded and archived on www.ishn.com. All registered participants will receive an email within 1 or 2 business days that has a link to view a recording of Brian's presentation. And now I am excited to turn it over to our speaker today, our presenter, Brian Galanik. Brian?
Thank you, Dave, and welcome everybody. I see an awful lot of people coming on board right now, and we had a lot of people registered for this event, which obviously is very encouraging, and I want to thank everybody who's joining us today and also tell you that there'll be some survey questions asked during the presentation, as Dave mentioned, and those survey questions will allow you to see feedback from others in the industry and how they answer the same questions, and you'll see the results live and on screen, and then if you get a copy of the presentation after, those survey results will be more complete with everybody's responses in. The presentation, the 4 pillars of safety, engagement, recognition, communications, and measurement. These are the 4 pillars as I see them, as my company sees them. I personally have been doing this for about 25 years. I realize my image is on screen and perhaps I look older than that, but that's about how old I am in terms of how many years of experience I have in the business. And what I've seen, what my company has seen over these years, is that engagement is key, obviously, to making the initial connection with employees. Recognition is crucial for gaining their interest in what you're doing. Communications is essential for getting the message out, and then measurement is necessary, of course, in the way it connects everything together and allows companies to go ahead and adjust what they're doing. We want to talk about these 4 things. Obviously, in the 40 minutes or so that we have, I can only scratch the surface, but you'll get a good idea how they all come together and how they all work together to produce a great safety culture. So the first of these that we want to drill down on is engagement. We can go ahead and push the slide. Engagement is very much the connection point formed between individuals on the job. and workers and the managers that actually try to direct them. Engagement is that place where, again, the human connection takes place. And as such, I call it the connection point. The role of engagement, the slides may or may not be sliding forward here, and there we go. Excellent. The role of engagement, next slide please, is a basic assertion, a very simple assertion that as engagement increases, safety improves. Okay, now you can plug in, whenever I talk about safety, you can plug in wellness as well. Okay, and I think wellness and safety go hand in hand, and we see that in our industry all the time now, that there's very little difference in the objectives between wellness and safety, and both feed off of the same things. In the case of engagement, it's a question of whether or not you can get employees to behave in a certain way and to act proactively safe, or for that matter, act proactively healthy on the job. And in doing so, one of the first things you need is to improve the level of engagement. So we'll go ahead and jump into first poll question. It's a pretty simple question. What percentage of your workforce do you think demonstrates a strong commitment to your company? And while I'm waiting for the answers to come in, I'll tell you that what we're looking for here is your personal impression. Obviously, you don't have a study ready to go. You can't immediately, probably most of you haven't seen an engagement study done by your company that you can just feed off of, but in your own opinion, what percentage of your workforce demonstrates a strong commitment to your company? And you can see you have a range here, 0 to 24, 25 to 49, 50 to 74, and 75 to 100. Well, we're looking to find out, and I can see the answers pouring in now. Thank you. We'll give it just another 30 seconds and then I'll push them to you. We're looking to find out and kind of demonstrate the difference between perception and reality. So here are the results as we see them right now. Again, these will hold pretty true because enough people were already in, but when you get the final version of this presentation, the numbers might change a bit because those of you that are still answering it, those answers will still be compiled. What we see here is that, and this is similar to past presentations that I've done, that most of you fall in that 50 to 74% range. Okay, second most is 25 to 49, and then 75 to 100. If I were going to assess what the average response here would be, I guess I'd put it somewhere in that 60 to 65% range. So for most of you, you think approximately 65% of your workforce is demonstrating a strong commitment to your company. So let's take a look at the reality. I think you just went past it. In reality, and this is based on a study that's been conducted many times, only about 11% of today's workforce demonstrates a very strong commitment to their workforce. I mean, to the company they work for. Okay, about 11%. Human Capital Institute did the study most recently. That's a pretty scary number, right? If in reality about 11% of our workforce, and it's different for some companies, there's no doubt about it. You might immediately think that your workforce is more engaged than that, and that's fine. And others may agree with this number. I know we had some people that were answering, below 24%. But the reality is it's probably far less than you think. And there's any number of different reasons for that. But one of the things I can tell you is that in any study that's been done out there of the number one reason why people leave their job, compensation you might think would always be the number one answer, and at times it is. In fact, in more recent times where the job market has been so bad, compensation might be one of the answers that comes up most often. But the other answer that would surprise people is that lack of recognition, and I'll get to that more in the recognition section. But one of the reasons, most important reasons people leave their job is lack of recognition. And what you see is that when people don't feel like they're being recognized, they also don't have a strong commitment. They're not engaged, and they don't feel committed to their workforce. And I don't care what our initiatives are. Today we're here to talk about safety and our ability to drive safety performance. But no matter what your objectives are, it's going to be hard to reach through that audience if they don't feel committed to your company. So the power of engagement. I want to hit you with, again, we're going to skim the surface here today. And anybody that's interested, feel free to reach out to me after. We have studies and research and all kinds of information that will drill down substantially on any of these pillars. But 85% of employees see a link between their level of motivation and the quality and quantity of their work. All right, right off the bat, a number that's pretty significant in trying to figure out how and what we want to do with our workforce. Disengaged employees cost the U.S. economy hundreds of billions of dollars annually. The number is staggering. And you can just imagine, we've all seen that, people who work within our companies that don't produce at a high level, that aren't engaged, and that cost the company in any number of different ways. One of the things we see is that turnover is very high in disengaged companies, or that it's 13% lower in organizations with high levels of engagement. And And here's the next stat. This one, if you were going to pluck a handful of stats out of this presentation and go in and show it to your boss and say to your boss, here's why I want to run this program and here's why I think it's going to be effective. Here's what I want to do. I would suggest to you that the next one is the one that might grab their attention. Assuming your boss is operations or even a principal of the company, you can imagine that they have concerns that go beyond safety, and you need to speak their language. Earnings per share on a public company and profitability in a non-public company. High engagement firms, companies with high levels of engagement, have a growth rate in earnings per share of 28% versus an 11% decline in low engagement firms. Put shortly, low engagement firms are on their path of going out of business. High engagement firms are obviously doing much better than their competition, and that bears itself out over a long period of time. Why do we care about engagement and earnings per share? Because I'm going to bring it all back home and talk about safety and where the safety manager and safety personnel are most responsible for generating the engagement that actually leads towards higher levels of engagement within the employee base. And engaged employees are more productive, profitable, safer, healthier, and create better working relationships. So how does it connect to safety? The proactive impact. Engagement is obviously going to help reinforce safe work behaviors. It's going to get you more suggestions, near-miss reporting. It's going to increase participation in team meetings. It can be a great adjunct to BBS programs and VPP programs. And yes, OSHA has had stuff to say about incentive programs, but contrary to some belief out there, OSHA has not said nothing but negative things about incentive programs. What they've said is that certain types of incentive programs can be counterproductive to a safe workforce. And stop the presses, I agree. There are certain types of incentive programs, and we'll talk about them, but those are not necessarily conducive to driving a behavior-based safety recognition rewards program that produces results. The good news is OSHA has said that properly built incentive programs, recognition rewards programs, do promote safety on the job, and it has to be a qualified program. And again, we align pretty well. I think their knowledge is a little bit light, but we align pretty well with them in terms of understanding which types of programs get the right types of results. Promote safety at home and in the car and within family as well. Again, a proactive impact to safety. We're not just looking for them to be safe on the job. We want them to be safe in and out of their workforce. We care as much about them getting hurt at home as we do on the job. Increased retention of safety-sensitive employees. Again, turnover is very much a safety issue. We'll come back to that a couple times, but when you have a workforce that is constantly turning and you're constantly replacing with new workers, those workers by their very nature are not as in tune with the job. And also in replacing them and having people cover their shifts, of course, while you are looking for new replacement workers, you're very often going to have somebody who's less safe on the job. Enhanced working environment, the well-being, team building, social reinforcement. Come back to wellness as well, but wellness is very much a safety issue. Obese workers tend to have more sleep apnea. Sleep apnea tends to lead to more tiredness. And if you have those people working heavy equipment or in vehicles, tired driving leads to accidents. And a lot of it does trace back to health and wellness related issues. And to promote learning and reinforce training. Again, the connection to safety here. If they're more engaged, you're going to get more participation in training. And that greater participation will lead towards greater retention. And retaining the training information they've had will be crucial on the job when they need it most to avoid accidents and injuries. And that's really what these results point out. By getting a higher level of engagement as it relates to safety, we're going to reduce accidents, injuries, and safety-related costs. So what about strategies for engagement? I've alluded to this first one already. Health and wellness programs. All right, safety is one great way to strategize around engagement, using our safety initiatives as a way of engaging employees, not simply sticking a poster on the wall or handing out a scratch card or waiting till the end of the year and giving away a pickup truck. Those aren't engagement strategies, but you can really engage within the framework of safety. But beyond that, you can, of course, engage within the framework of wellness and tie those two things together. Training and development, as I mentioned before, not just safety, but non-safety related training is a great way to engage them. Not here's a computer in a room, close the door and study for an hour and good luck on the test, but you have an opportunity in a training environment to do so in a group environment, in a face-to-face environment, and one that's rewarding and gets the employees engaged early on and is far more likely to have them actually retain the information they learn. Safety team meetings, ad hoc meetings, pre-shift meetings, tailgate meetings, any place where you're getting together face-to-face is a great opportunity. Face-to-face, is the most important way, not just to engage, but also to recognize and reward people. Dave mentioned that there'd be a quiz for those that wanted to take it after, 10 questions and an opportunity to earn a certificate for passing it. I can tell you that's one I might want to remember. Face-to-face recognition is the single most important way to recognize and reward people in a context of engagement in these types of rewards programs. New employee orientation, mentoring programs. I mean, when they first come in the door, great opportunity. Again, why are we talking about this to safety people? Maybe that's an HR responsibility. Well, maybe it is. And maybe the first person they're going to meet when they come through the door is HR. But who are they going to meet next? Operations? Maybe. Somebody in sales? I don't know. But eventually, if not right away, they're going to come meet somebody in the safety department if they have a safety sensitive position. And those are the people, obviously, that you're interacting with. When they meet you or your subordinates or anybody else in your staff, what are we doing to engage them right out of the gate? What are we doing to tell them right out of the gate that safety is of paramount importance and to reinforce our company-wide safety metrics and goals? Those are opportunities, along with mentoring after the fact, of keeping them engaged, keeping them happy on the job, and watching it come through in the way we perform. And suggestion programs, employee surveys, quizzes, these types of things as well. All of these add up to greater levels of engagement, and they give you opportunities throughout the life of that employee's tenure with the company to keep coming back to them and reinforcing best work practices. So according to a study by Gallup, 86% of engaged employees said they would characterize their interactions with coworkers as always positive. There's a pretty good one right there to stick in that one pager for your boss. Close to 90% of everybody reflecting on what engagement means. Okay, recognition. So the second pillar is recognition. It's the energy, right? So first we needed the connection point. Energy is wasted if it doesn't actually get through to its target. Now we need to actually be able to generate the energy that comes through to those employees, that gets through the engagement process. And recognition is that energy, all right? We know, I mean, in our own life, I don't care if you can reflect back on what it was like when you first got your first job. If your boss came around the corner, or for that matter, a coworker, and said, Dave, great job. I saw what you did with the new employee. I saw the new training program you put together, thought it was excellent. That goes a long way, okay? And those types of recognition moments exist in any company, and they certainly should if they don't, and they need to be there with regularity. But as it relates to safety and the safety-related issues, do we have a process in place to recognize good behavior on an ongoing basis? So what, the power of recognition as it relates to this presentation, it's going to add emphasis to all elements of your safety program, everything I'm talking about, okay? It's going to energize your workforce and create buzz, energy, take your pick. It's going to create something that's going to put more emphasis on what we're trying to do. It's going to optimize your engagement strategies at all levels, all right? Again, engagement strategies are great by themselves, but we need something behind them to keep people from constantly looking at their phone and not paying attention during safety meetings. It's going to motivate proactive safe behavior. This one's in there for OSHA, but it's also in there because it works. Proactively safe behavior, forming those habits that are actually going to make you safer down the road, will eventually come through in statistics relating to accidents and injuries. It's going to elevate bidirectional employee communication. Bidirectional, again, I'll tell you, this is a pretty important one. When we talk about communication, when companies talk about it, they very often mean me, management, talking to the employee. That's important. It's very important, but it's also extremely important for the employee to be able to communicate back to their manager in a safety environment, in a wellness environment, in an engagement initiative. And really, these types of programs, the ones that I'm kind of alluding to here, and we'll drill down on a little further, allow employees, if they're done properly, to communicate back to the company itself, right? So surveys that can be answered anonymously or otherwise, and giving them a voice. Committees that actually have a say in how these things are structured. Internal employee newsletters. These things allow the employees to get the message out as well, and they're enormously important. It ties initiatives together, behavior-based safety, wellness, VPP. I've mentioned these things, but it's a way to connect those two things so you don't have silos. What used to be considered a good word in the business world and by some is now considered to be a not so good word, or islands. You don't want these things unconnected. You want to be able to build bridges between them. And again, recognition can do that. And to facilitate the addition of a rewards program element. Recognition by its very nature works great. Recognition combined with rewards program can actually give you that much higher level of participation. Recognition's impact on behavior, very simple rule, and behavior is a topic unto itself, of course, and one that would require its own number of sessions to get through. But a real simple rule here, and whether it's 20-60-20 or 10-80-10 or 25-50-25, doesn't really make a difference. The point is, and we all know this, we see it in our everyday life, that some percentage, for the sake of this argument, 20% of your workforce is self-motivated. They're ready to go. They don't really need external motivation. They show up, they're engaged, they know what they want to do within the company, and they're going to work hard for it, and that includes being safe. Another 20% should probably be fired tomorrow. Or even if they shouldn't be fired, we just know that they can't be reached. They're not great participants, they're not great workers, and frankly, there's no real interest on their part, and it doesn't make a difference what we offered or did with them. We weren't really going to get their level of engagement up. Okay, and over a period of time, obviously, the better companies find a way of culling those people out of the system. But the middle 60%, the middle chunk, however big it is, and it's usually the largest chunk by far, can be motivated. They'll respond to stimuli, they'll respond to proper training, better engagement, face-to-face recognition, better motivation, and they'll respond to a recognition program, particularly if it has a rewards component to it. So we don't just recognize them for doing a good job, we reward them when they can get 10 out of 10 on a quiz that relates to the safety training they just received. We reward them for making a good safety suggestion. We reward them for implementing someone else's good safety suggestion, and so on and so forth. Or we reward them for things that we didn't tell them we were going to reward them for. We recognize that they did a great job mentoring the new employee. We pull them aside, we thank them, and ideally in a face-to-face environment, we hand them some sort of a tangible point voucher that they can begin to earn towards earning incentives that will keep motivating them to do more. BBS and recognition. Again, I've done a number of these presentations. Some of you may have seen me before. I know I spent at least one really drilling down on BBS across the board and talking about the behavior-based side and how it interacts with these programs. But again, the short version of that, and really for the purpose of this presentation, all we really need to know is that BBS has certain characteristics. Many of you, I'm sure, have used it. You need buy-in from all. Okay, you need dispassionate data collection. We need to know the facts without actually making it seem punitive to people that are actually helping us find those facts. We need to focus on common goals. We need feedback, back to the facts, but we also need feedback, and we need review of what's currently going on in the environment. We need expectations. We need to set expectations for small gains over and over again, right? Behavior-based safety isn't a panacea. It's a path towards that. It's a journey, not a destination type of a goal where we're looking to make small changes over a period of time that add up. And we need to consider the environment, the equipment, the procedures, the attitudes, right? I mean, if we have a workforce that's working on a very wet, slippery floor, and we keep having slip and falls and strains and sprains, we obviously have to have some idea that no matter how much we try to engineer out those problems, we have to actually look at, producing a drier floor, using match, giving them rubber-soled boots, things like this. These things need to be considered, and it really is continuous growth, not a quick fix. Again, coming back to the small expectations, small gains over a period of time. There's a stat out there that's used in baseball and in business and other places that it takes a certain number of repetitions to form muscle memory. And it's the same way in behavior-based safety. And again, back to recognition for a moment, you're going to foster that repetitive behavior. In this case, I mean repetitive in a good way. When somebody makes a safety suggestion, when somebody attends those safety meetings, but does so with repetition, when somebody does the lockout tagout procedures exactly the right way and exactly the same way over and over again, it will eventually become muscle memory. How do we get there? Do we just tell them to do it that way and they'll remember it? No. I mean, yes, but we also go ahead and reward them for doing so to a certain extent and find a way of getting them to want to do so over and over again. And after a period of time, they'll form that muscle memory. Recognition and rewards, some additional stats. 84.7, call it 85% of respondents said their company's safety consciousness increased as a result of their safety incentive and rewards program. There's a pretty good one to throw at your boss as well, and it's a Towers Perrin or a Gallup poll or both, and you can get those at the end of this presentation. But you have a huge percentage of people who are saying, yes, I became more conscious of my safety objectives as a result of participation in my safety recognition rewards program. Incentive programs aimed at individuals increased performance by 27%. Great number. How many, of you on the phone wouldn't want to see a 27% drop in claims? Long-term incentive programs are more than twice as powerful as short-term incentive programs, right? 44 to 20%. Okay. There's another one you may want to just keep in the back of your mind for post-presentation, right? Long-term incentive programs are more than twice as powerful than short-term programs. We know behavior and safety in all of our initiatives here are 24/7, 365. We're not looking to run a really good safety improving program between now and the end of June. What happens in July and August. So these things really do need to be out there around the clock. But the good news is once they are out there around the clock, they are a tool that can be drawn on over and over and over again to the benefit of the company, the employee, and the management staff as well. And 92% of corporations reported that their objectives were met, surpassed, or at least partially met through the use of incentive programs. Some pretty strong evidence that a properly built incentive program, recognition reward program, is going to produce results. Some do's and don'ts. Again, my past presentations, this was another one I drilled down on substantially, but to give you a cursory overview, and let me just say right here that the opposite of every do is a don't, and the opposite of every don't is a do, right? So this is really a checklist of things to do properly or to avoid in building a good recognition reward program. Secure management support. Needless to say, you're not going to get very far without it. Okay, using stats, using data, and also reassuring them that you can run trial programs, the likes of which I'm talking about can be tested and tried in an environment where they can be very inexpensive to prove the concept, and then you can go ahead and expand them to a larger audience. Involve employees in the design. I mentioned earlier, if you disconnect from the employees, if you go into your war room and come back out with this great program and then hand it out to everyone and say, look what we produced, you're going to have less buy-in than if the employees have a stake in designing that program to begin with. The part of the program that employees need input on needs to be structured to a certain extent though, right? So you want to give them a canvas, but it's not a blank canvas. You want to give them some idea of the structure of the program you're looking for, and then have them impart their own views on the design element within that structure. But you don't want to just say, tell us what you want, because what they'll tell you is give us cash. And that's one of the don'ts in this program, and one that's been proven to be very unsuccessful. I'll come back to that in a minute. Communicate continually. When we design a program and put one out the door, again, an engagement, a recognition rewards program that has safety and wellness built into it, we need to communicate it. And we need to communicate it on an ongoing basis. It's not something we just announce, hang a poster on the wall, and hope it's still being effective 2 years later. We need face-to-face recognition. Say no more, I've covered that one already. It's enormously important. We need tangible and desirable rewards. Come back to the cash thing for a minute. Cash is not tangible and it's not desirable. I'll take it back. It's desirable. Within the context of a program, though, it's not memorable, right? So it's not tangible. You don't know what you did with it. It's not memorable. You can't remember what you did with it. It is what everybody will say they want, but they won't work harder or safer for it. And there's great studies to back that up as well. We need to expand the reach of the program into the home and families and kids. Well, again, we care about safety, not just on the job, but in everything they're doing. We need to set up a program where we can measure and assess and adjust the results of the program, right? We don't want to just launch it and hope it's doing well and then assume it's doing well, or for that matter, assume it's doing poorly. We need to measure it, and there are any number of ways to do that, but we have to put time in up front. The things we don't want to do, skimp on the branding, okay? So we do want to brand the program. You are creating your own Coca-Cola, okay, your own Disney when you do this. And when I talk about a brand name, I'm talking about the fact that your safety, your company's safety and your company's safety initiatives and your company's safety goals and metrics, what have you, collectively are your brand. It's your safety brand, okay? If there are companies on the phone that aren't particularly good at safety, frankly, if you're in a really bad way right now, okay, you don't even have enough money, let's say, or enough budget to buy good PPE and protective equipment, you have no training, manager turnover is sky high, I'll grant you have to solve those problems first, okay? But when you get to the point where you're ready to go from good to great, or even average to good, it's time to put a brand name on your program and promote it as a brand. And that comes back to the communication side as well. It needs to be communicated, and you need to put a brand name on it. People respond to brand names. If they didn't, 98% of all the products in your grocery store would be generics instead of 2%. Brand names work, and it's actually the best way to promote what you're doing going forward. Don't neglect to set goals and performance expectations. Again, this comes back to measurement. You can't just go out there and not know what it is you're trying to achieve. Set the goals and communicate the goals to the audience. Don't use cash or cash equivalents. Okay, and a cash equivalent gas cards, prepaid credit cards, many other gift cards are cash equivalents. If I give you $50 in cash for being safe, okay, or for coming up with a great safety suggestion, and I ask you 6 months later, let alone 6 years later, what you did with the cash, you won't know. If I give you points as part of a recognition program and give you the ability to earn additional points, and you eventually cash those points in for your favorite fishing pole or golf club or TV set, I can ask you 6 years later where you got that fishing pole, and you'll know. All right. The tangible awards, the brand name tangible awards, are what make the difference. Okay. Cash is what everybody will say they want. The actual tangible, guilt-free brand name awards are what they'll work harder for and what will reinforce the very idea that safety is an important part of the company's culture. Don't reward an entire group for group behavior. Don't do it. It's probably being done by a number of you. Certainly in my time talking to this industry now, many, many years, and actually a decade plus, I find that this is probably the most prevalent way that companies have rewarded their employees. I think it's beginning to subside. I think companies like ours that talk about this, and OSHA as well, have gone a long way to making this happen. But if you are used to basically saying that everybody on the second shift will have their name thrown in a hat if everybody on the second shift is safe for the next 6 months, and then we'll pick one winner out of the hat, and we'll give that person a pickup truck. And this comment relates to the next two bullets, by the way, right? Exceedingly high value awards and the element of chance. Giving them a chance to win a very high value award and then handing out one award after a period of time is frankly a waste of resources. If there are 500 people in that second shift, okay, you're one of those 500, and I told you had a 1 in 500 chance of winning that pickup truck, you wouldn't think you were going to win, and you'd be right. At least 499 of you would be right? So you'd have no expectation you were going to win, which means there was no pull to begin with in setting up that type of reward program. And then you wouldn't win. Again, the vast, vast, vast majority of you wouldn't win, which would reinforce the fact that there wasn't really value behind the award system put in place. And then the one person who did win, whatever, doesn't give you value. You've spent a lot of money on one person and haven't used it to create enhanced value across the board. So don't reward an entire group for group behaviors. If you have a sign out in front of your building that says 207 days accident-free, I'd suggest you take the thing down and replace it with a more appropriate message, because 200 days accident-free, or better yet, 199 days accident-free, basically tells a guy who rolls his ankle on the job the next day, don't report it, okay? Because you don't want to be the one that see that thing go for, instead of going to 200, it goes down to 0. Or if there were a $50 cash award to everybody in that same situation, you're the one who's going to cost everybody their $50 reward. You're not going to tell anybody you just put a dent in the truck, right? Those are the things OSHA doesn't like. Those are the things, frankly, that don't work long term. You want to reward individuals for individual behavior. Next section, communication, next pillar, I should say, and this really is the wiring. We talked already about engagement. So there's a survey up on your screen. You can go ahead and read it and answer. You can check all that apply. We talked about engagement. Obviously, we talked about communications we talked about recognition, and now we're talking about communications. Engagement, the connection point; recognition, the energy itself, the buzz; and then communications, the path with which that buzz is going to get to your employees. This survey question: how is your company's safety message currently communicated? Obviously, this relates directly to what we want to talk about next. There's a number of choices here: meetings, printed materials, including posters, letters, brochures, any number of other things you might think of. Newsletters I would treat separately. Does your company have newsletters that relate to the company as a whole and perhaps have a safety section or safety-specific newsletters? Website, intranet sites, or the like. Emails, and I'll tell you what, I'll lump on top of emails text messages as well. Emails or text messages. Is your company using that? Or again, presentations, award ceremonies, and other won't tell us a lot, but you're welcome to select other as well. Looks like we have enough results, and we'll go ahead and take a look at what you're saying. So no surprise here that meetings and printed materials, and therefore I guess presentations I'll lump in there as well, are very high on the list. 62% of you say that you're using meetings. I'm surprised it's not higher. It probably is if I gave more people a time to come in. But most companies, of course, have some sort of meeting structure in place. Many companies, of course, are doing printed materials and presentations and the like. When you look at newsletters, you see a pretty big drop-off. When you see website and intranet site, you see a pretty big drop-off. Same thing with award ceremonies. An award ceremony speaks speaks to recognition and rewarding itself, right? Calling people up in front of their peers and rewarding them. I guess my comment here would be on any of the items that seem to be underutilized at this point. When you decide to put a true brand name on your safety culture, and when you promote that brand name through engagement and through a recognition rewards program, you're going to want to use every element at your disposal. So if there isn't a company newsletter now, okay, maybe too much to ask the company to create one, but create a safety newsletter, okay, or ask the company you help deploy this program to do one for you, and put that out at least quarterly and use it as a way of communicating, accomplishments within that framework. Websites and intranet sites are a must. It's amazing. I have clients who tell me, I think a lot of my guys don't go online. And then we go ahead and launch a program that's online, and the vast majority end up online. And then we ask them, how are you getting online? And before you know it, the company's collecting email addresses and other information that they never had before. In many of my programs, the most popular site that a company has by far as it relates to their employees is the recognition rewards platform we build for them. Very often 20 times the traffic that a company gets to its own intranet site, right? So a company has an intranet site. An employee theoretically would be enamored with that site because it has their healthcare benefits and all the other HR related information they should probably be very interested in. And when we launch a recognition rewards program, okay, that might have safety related information, wellness related information, give them a chance to track their points and see how well they're doing in a program, those sites will get 10 or 20 times the traffic. So much so that very often, in order to appease HR, we'll put the path to that site through the company's intranet site. So use every channel you have available at your disposal. So here are some thoughts on the communication imperative, and it relates to what I was just saying. The message must get through. Well-intended messages are wasted if not received. We can come up with the best message in the world, okay, shout it from the rooftops, but if nobody hears it, we're not going to get very far, okay, or it's not going to have its intended results. The message needs to be understood. Okay, we shouted it from the rooftops and people heard it, but they didn't really internalize it. They didn't get what that message was all about. So we need to make sure it's actually understood. We need to use all communication avenues available to us, okay, include old and new world alternatives, social media, text messages where appropriate, but old world media as well. Printed posters and flyers and catalogs where appropriate make great sense. We need to, the results must be measured. So communication is something you can measure. Some people probably don't think of it that way, but you can do it. And there's an imperative for doing this, right? So you need to know if your message is getting through, and measurement is the way to accomplish that. The importance of brand. Here's another one I spent some time on in past presentations, and I've already covered some of this already, so I'll skim it. You need a brand name on your program, okay? It really does need to be branded. If you're just handing out scratch cards that are not branded, you don't have a branded program, and you're sort of sending a message to your workforce that you kind of half-assed it. You know what I'm saying? You just took the easy path and did something of something that was easy and convenient, but wasn't really meant to show a show of faith and strength. So you need to put a brand name on that program. That brand should reflect the company's beliefs, right? Companies very often have their stated beliefs already well known, and safety, even if it's not specifically a safety belief, safety can dovetail directly together with customer service. It can dovetail together with everything, from being the best in any industry to being the best for their customers. It needs to be communicated. I think we've covered that. Safety brands must be ubiquitous, right? Once you get it out there, you want to keep putting it out there. Doesn't do you any good to tell them once and then move on. And safety brands must be protected. Like Coca-Cola, like Disney, like anybody else out there is protecting their brand, you're going to want to do the same thing with your safety brand. The connection points. This comes back to, again, communication and branding. The platforms that are available to you are numerous. You can see right there what's listed, not just web and email, but videos. I think we've all seen now that videos have become enormously important ways of communicating and selling, and therefore they're an enormously important method to communicate your safety program and objectives as well. Print, graphics, graphic design, logo creation, slogans and taglines, the content of news stories, welcome messages, unsolicited or solicited testimonials. All of these things are things that need to be promoted and communicated. And again, if this sounds overwhelming, let me just take a quick step back and say, I'm hitting you with a laundry list. I'm not saying all these things get done at once. Typically, you'll build a recognition rewards program and revolving around engagement strategies, and you'll do some of these things initially, and then you'll increment others into the mix as you go forward. Interactions, instant recognition, face-to-face meetings, on-the-spot awards. These are all great ways of obviously promoting the brand itself. Feedback, training, surveys, and quizzes, all great ways to get that two-way communication we talked about before. And the results, from a safety, retention, and sales standpoint. And sales, let me just mention real quick as I move to the next slide. Sales is something that comes through. It may not be a natural way of thinking of things. We're talking about safety. What does that have to do with sales? But I have many customers and big industrial clients that say that because they're the safest company in their industry, it helps their sales force close deals. When they're out there pitching large corporate clients, the differentiator, they're more or less the same as their competition, but the differentiator is they can say, we're the safest company in our industry, and it actually helps them land deals. Okay, and the last of the pillars, the measurement, the input stream. Again, we cannot fly blind, and so we need to know what's going on. So let's start by getting a quick survey out there. What are you currently measuring? And again, this is a check all that apply. What is your company currently measuring? The obvious choices: accident and incident rates. I shouldn't say obvious. You tell me if it's obvious. Accident and incident rates, claims and frequency and or severity. Are those things you're measuring? How about levels of employee engagement and satisfaction? Are you measuring your levels of employee engagement and satisfaction? Do you see that as something that's even attainable? Or does HR in your company see it as something that's attainable? Turnover rates. And not just turnover rates for the company, very often those are known, but what about turnover rates for your safety sensitive employees? Do we know how quickly these jobs turn and how well that relates to others in my industry? How about employee health assessments? Do we have that type of information coming back to us as it relates to wellness? Employee knowledge of company goals. If you stopped any employee in your company and said, what are the 5 pillars of our company, the 5 most important objectives of our company, would they know them? And what about training and training knowledge and retention? Is that something you're measuring right now? Okay, looks like we got enough to push them out. So no surprise, we're measuring accidents and incident rates and claims and frequency. And looks like we get a fair amount of measurement around training and knowledge retention. But feeding off of what I've been talking about, feeding off of this presentation as a whole, only 10% of you are saying that you're measuring, or you have you're seeing, if you will, reporting on the turnover rates of your safety sensitive positions. All right, that leaves you in the dark. If you don't know the turnover rates there, you can't benchmark against your industry. If you can't benchmark against your industry, you don't know if your safety sensitive employees are turning over faster than someone else in a similar industry. And if they are, it makes it more difficult to figure out why and what you can do to mitigate it. The employee health assessment, I've touched on this, and so I'll leave it at what I've said, but there is a great direct connection between wellness and safety, wellness and engagement, and health assessments are one way of finding out where you stand now as a way of measuring and then comparing performance down the road. And I guess if I were to pick one other here, employee knowledge of company goals. Well, I tell you, it's probably something, if they don't know it, if 30 days on the job they can't repeat those, I would reinforce that training every month until they can. A company, an employee should certainly know the goals. We know some of those goals will revolve around safety, and we need to measure that in order to move forward. So let's just talk about a measurement fact here for a second. One you might want to remember. For after the presentation, only 22% of companies measure their program success. Okay, this comes from the principles of results-based incentive program design. Okay, and within that framework, we only have about 1 out of 5, plus or minus 22% of companies measuring their success. This is probably the single greatest fault with the programs that we interact with, that we either create or interact with. Now you can imagine we don't let our clients make this mistake. At times, though, we're not necessarily able to affect change. So we can measure everything we do for a company. We can't force a company to measure what they do, but you can bet we sure as heck try. And companies really need to do this. We need to set expectations up front, take some baseline measurements, and then go ahead and check out how we're doing over the life of the program. Measurements, objectives, some pretty obvious ones. We just saw our answers to this level, right? Accidents, injuries, claims, lost time, OSHA incident rates, lost pick. Take your pick. These are things you're very well aware of and things that need to be measured. But other things, engagement, these are doable, by the way. If you're sitting there saying, how the heck do you measure engagement? You can do it. You do it through a series, and of course you rely on a company that's an expert in the subject. But if it's morale or engagement, there are a series of questions and ways in which to ask these questions that will allow you to ascertain how engaged your workforce is and how engaged they are on an ongoing basis. So whatever you score, let's call it a 10-point scale. If you put this survey out there and your level of engagement is measured at a 6.8 at the beginning of the year, and we go through and we put together engaging, recognizing, recognition rewards programs built around safety, and at the end of the year you measure an 8.1, you can be sure, okay, with some control factors in place, that your efforts have created a more engaged workforce. And from there, it's off to the races. You have their attention. You can now do something with that as it relates to safety and wellness. And again, other more obscure but very doable measurement, turnover we talked about, wellness, of course, earnings per share. Overlay a couple of graphs together. Okay, take that engagement survey that we just did, or something else along the lines of human interaction, and overlay it with a company's earnings per share. Take a look in any given year. If a company's EPS tends to drift upward, at the same time your level of engagement tends to be higher as a result of your activities. You want to walk into your boss and show them something that gets you the budget you need for next year's program, there's a real good one. Okay, we know loss pick. We understand that the loss pick is a pretty big budget item for a lot of companies, but have they made the connection that finding a way to engage my workforce better, okay, and incent them and recognize them for their proper behaviors by communicating, putting a brand name on it and communicating it properly, and then measuring the results? Have they internalized the fact that this can actually move the company's EPS needle? And it can, but somebody has to make the case. And lost productivity. There's another one that very often is kind of swept under the rug, and not a lot of attention isn't paid to it. But that feeds right into the iceberg graphic that you've seen many times before. I put it in here only because it is so familiar. But we have direct cost and we have indirect costs, right? We know this. The direct costs are, I would say, for most people, for many people, that's what we're doing day in, day out, right? We're measuring our stats, our incident rates, our average cost of a claim, and employee salaries and the insurance cost itself, and all the normal loss pick stuff. And we can see that it's sitting at the tip of the iceberg. And many people on the phone, I know this because I interact with you at the trade shows, and I see you in my own travels as it relates to safety. Many of you get the items below the surface here, right? The indirect cost, right? The cost of training and replacing workers, of damage to equipment and what have you, lost production, people covering other shifts, overhead costs, lost employee confidence. As I talked about earlier, lost sales. The inability to actually go out and a Salesforce perspective and sell your safety as a difference maker in your company. All of those things have a cost as well. They're very frequently not measured. They're very frequently not well understood. And if you've heard the same stats I've heard over the years, and if you've witnessed what I've witnessed, they are at a minimum 2 to 1, and very often cited as 4 to 1 or greater, meaning that the indirect cost can be 2 to 4 times or more the direct cost. All right, so if you're talking about $100,000 above the surface, you might be talking about $400,000 below the surface. How is your manager, how is your ops manager or a proprietor in the company going to believe that? Frankly, you need the measurement, right? You can't just say, well, we have a loss of confidence. We might not be landing as much in the way of sales. We had some productivity slide. If I'm that person, him or her, I'm going to say, well, prove it to me. And it's doable. You got to take a step back. You got to engage some experts and then find out how to actually produce the measurements that will prove that to the boss. So benefits of measurement, real quick as I wrap up here. We're not just spending money, we're actually helping to prove the return on investment, right? We need to actually, in order to get the funding we're looking for, we need to prove that ROI, or what we call in my company, ROI squared, your return on incentive investment. Employee empowerment and input. Okay, it's going to give us a direct path to that information. Better analysis. We're not flying blind, right? We're not just saying to our boss, or for that matter, going home with our own analysis, saying, I think it's working. You'll know it's working, and you'll have data to back it up and some really colorful bar charts and line graphs to feed off of. A more complete picture of true cause and effect, coming back to behavior-based side as well. But even if we know it's successful, do we know why it's successful? Measurement's going to let us help us determine those factors. It's a holistic approach, organization-wide. Once you get something like this out there, I have companies, again, we've created safety brands for them. There isn't a person in that company that doesn't know what the safety brand is. It's become holistic. It's become ubiquitous. It's become something that everybody in the company understands that safety matters, and here's our safety brand, and here's how it ties to our objectives, and they start to live it. And it's going to expose new opportunities. Measurement is one of the best ways to say good, better, and different. There's another opportunity sitting right there, and it jumps right off the data when you look at the page. So that's more or less the presentation, but I do want to ask, and I want to get to Q&A, but real quick here. Again, I've been doing this now for 5 years, these webinars. It's a great way for me to get the message out. Those who have been on before, and I already see some answers pouring in. I'd like for your own sake, to answer the following question: how is your safety budget likely to change over the next 12 months? And I will share with you in the final version of this presentation, which you can get if you just ask for it. We will go ahead and include the answers from previous years as well. So you'll not only see how your safety professionals, your fellow workers and safety feel that their budgets are changing right now, but I'll go ahead and plug in the results from the past at least 3 or 4 years, probably 5 years, including this one, where you can see how that's changed throughout this relatively difficult economic time. See a lot of answers coming in. We'll give it just another couple seconds here, and then we'll go ahead and push the results. And again, the final results will actually reflect every answer. The ones I'll push right now will be just everybody who's been quick on the trigger to give us an answer. And so we see by far stay the same is the number one thing, but very, very encouraging is that increase slightly, and we can lump in, well, let's wash out the increase substantially and the decrease substantially. What you see there is a ton of stay the same, but 3 to 1 increase slightly over decrease slightly. So more than 3 times to 1, or 3 out of every 4 of you think your budget's going to go up versus go down, and that's relative to those that think it's going to stay the same. I can tell you, having seen the data in the past, this is pretty encouraging. There were some pretty bleak numbers maybe 3 or 4 years ago relative to this. I mean, it's not sky high, obviously. I'd love to see more people seeing additional budget money, again, because I think every $1 spent here is going to save your company $2 to $4 and produce a healthy, happier, safer workforce. And we see it all day long. But it is encouraging. I think you'll see when we show you the other graphs that there is a trend in the safety marketplace that companies are willing to spend if they see results. That concludes my presentation, Dave, and we'll jump into a little Q&A whenever you're ready.
Very good, Brian. Thank you very much. That was a excellent presentation, Brian, and I think the more than 200 people watching you would agree that it's you've given kind of a state-of-the-art presentation on how safety cultures and safety programs are built and sustained today. And with that, we'll get to quite a queue of questions here, Brian, beginning with this question. How do you accomplish individual recognition with awards in a union environment?
Yeah, great question. It's something that has to be navigated. Before I answer, let me just tell you that, and because I can see on my own screen that there are a lot of questions, and we're only going to get to a handful, I will eventually push an answer out to every one of these questions, and we'll create a document that actually gives everybody the questions that were asked and my answers. You're going to have to give me a handful of business days, but they'll be available along with the final version of the presentation. And I'll also push an individual email to anybody that asked a question for those that don't hear it here. The union question is I will first let me say this. The majority of my safety incentive recognition rewards programs are deployed in union environments, so it's doable. You certainly saw my comments about engaging employees and getting them involved in the process. Well, of course, it's enormously important from a union standpoint as well. There's usually committees formed, shop stewards and union subcommittees as well, and those people have a vested interest in seeing how these programs work. What I would suggest to you is that we would start by engaging those people up front. We would share with them best practices. We would show them how and why similar companies with unions or that are partially union and partially non-union, we would show them how and why these programs work really well. But more often, I'll tell you, more than anything else, I show them data. And the data would show them, again, individual rewarding within a union environment. I know that in some cases, collective bargaining agreement says you can't pay one employee more than another in a union environment. We would endeavor to, and by the way, I've failed at this at times and we've succeeded a great many times, but we would endeavor to make them understand that this is not pay. In fact, it's the exact opposite of pay. And it's the entire reason why it's not compensation in the least. And it's the entire reason why we would tell them don't use cash bonuses. Okay, use something that actually makes an employee feel like they were, not feel like, actually are recognized and rewarded for their going above and beyond. In that environment, it's very often not a breach of a collective bargaining agreement. If there are concerns, they can be addressed. If it's applied evenly, which it can absolutely be done with our ability to monitor and measure the way programs work, those are hurdles we can get past. And on that union question, I'm happy to have a longer conversation with anyone who wants to, because we have real life examples of how we were able to get past objections and not only engage the union, but keep them actually excited about the prospects of launching a program.
You mentioned, Brian, rewarding individuals versus entire groups. This questioner wants to know, doesn't that violate OSHA's take on incentives?
No. No, actually, it's the opposite. So rewarding individuals is the way to keep Dr. Michaels happy. Rewarding entire groups is the way of ticking them off. All right. So when you take an entire group and put them together, as I was alluding to earlier, and you make everybody tied together at the hip, this is that quote unquote peer pressure. Some people call it good peer pressure. I don't think it is. Same thing, like I said, when you put the sign out in front of the building and it shows we're about to hit our 100th day accident free, the problem is you put undue pressure on an employee to not report that accident because they don't want to be the one that screws it up. Furthermore, if you say everybody on the, like I said, everybody in the Wisconsin plant is going to get $100, okay, or 100, something valuable, if everybody in the Wisconsin plant is safe during the month of July, okay, and on the 30th day of July, you go ahead and have an accident, you're not going to tell anybody. And you're not going to tell anybody, not because you're afraid of not getting your bonus $50 or whatever it might be. You're not going to tell anybody, potentially, because you're afraid of being the guy that cost all 400 people in that plant their gift. So when you tie the entire group together and reward the entire group for group behavior, and worse yet, when you give the entire group one chance of winning a trip to Hawaii, right, or a pickup truck, that's when OSHA says not a good program. The great news is that it's not a good program. It's not just that OSHA doesn't want you to run something that's actually good. It's that OSHA doesn't want you to run something that, historically speaking, is a poor long-term motivator. What we tell all of our customers is communicate long-term goals, right? Tell them what you want them to do. Show them on paper, before and after the fact, how well they're doing. Communicate long-term goals and show long-term results, but reward individual behaviors. Rewarding individuals for individual accomplishments, and you won't have people hiding injuries, and OSHA won't have a problem.
Here's a good question for off the job, Brian. You talked about how it's 24/7, 365. How do you reach, what has proven to you to be effective in terms of communicating into workers' homes and reaching their families?
Great. Yeah, perfect question. So, and actually, it's easier now than ever before, obviously, in the era of all this new technology and our ability to do so. I mentioned earlier the website traffic that we typically get to a recognition site, right? And how incredibly high that is. Okay, picture yourself, you're a worker, you just earned 50 bonus points for making a great safety suggestion. You go home, you turn on your computer and you check out the site. While you're on the site, you see a new survey that you can take and earn 10 bonus points, and your spouse comes over and looks over your shoulder and says, what's this all about? Okay, before you know it, you're engaged in a conversation about how, over a period of time, you're going to earn enough points to get a brand new vacuum cleaner for the house, okay, or a new DVD player, or, for that matter, concert tickets, or something that's engaging for both the spouse and the employee. First of all, that website can be loaded with information that's both beneficial to both the spouse, to the worker on the job, and the spouse or kids at home. We can have stuff in there about childhood obesity, okay? We can use other things like kids coloring contests, slogan competitions that involve family members as well, as a way of engaging them. We always want to print catalogs. Ironically, even as the era of print has diminished, we found new and better things to print. And so for most of my programs, we do want to print catalogs. We want those catalogs to go home. We want them sitting on a coffee table because, again, we want to catch the attention, the engagement, if you will, of a spouse. And then when you get into the healthcare side, and this is what I was saying earlier, why wellness is such an important piece of this. As it relates to wellness, companies can and will promote wellness into the home as well. And an insurance company is equally interested in not having you break your ankle as they are in having you manage your diabetes. So once you get a wellness component in there, you can actually have competitions with family weight loss, family exercise regimens, people joining the gym, things like this. There's any number of different ways. And again, don't be overwhelmed by that. If you're on the line, you're saying, God, how do I accomplish that? It's something you chip away at over a period of time, and you make it grow upon itself. But there are ways to get passively the same program into the home.
I think we have time for two more questions, Brian. Here's the first one. Has leading indicator-based incentive programs shown more positive outcome than incentive programs that reward employees for not having injury?
Another excellent question. People are well informed. In my world, I say that we want to do both. Now, again, for complete honesty here, OSHA doesn't like trailing indicators. I get that. This is where I come to OSHA and I say you need to understand one thing, that if we can't reach the entire audience or the vast majority of the audience, we can't affect as much change. So the reason why I do script into my programs, and I recommend that people do as well, a performance side, right, which is the trailing indicator, so to speak. No accidents, no injuries, no violations, if you will, during the month of June or during the first quarter. And I would, in my program format, I would recommend recognizing you and rewarding you at some level, even if it's a fairly minimal level, giving you 10 points, 20 points, something of recognition for the accomplishment of being safe, accident and injury free for that quarter. So I think that's part of it, because if you do that part of it, you can get 100% of the audience or close to it, okay, engaged in some portion of the program. The proactive side is absolutely enormously important, but that's where you reward people for making great safety suggestions, joining a safety committee, completing health assessments, as I said earlier, mentoring employees or completing their CPR training, being a first responder. All of those things, those proactive things they do, should absolutely be recognized and rewarded on the spot awards. But those will reach, typically speaking, 20 to 25% of a workforce, okay, which is a huge number. 25% of your workforce makes a safety suggestion or participates in these other non-mandatory programs. That's a great number. But if you want to recognize, if you want to be able to motivate the full 100%, you need some combination of both.
Your presentation information appears to focus more on employee engagement. However, what would you add, change, or do differently to improve management and leadership engagement, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably just an oversight on my part to not have mentioned the fact that you want recognition to go up and down the chain of command. And what I would do is essentially, my answer would be in short, because I know we're running short on time. My answer in short is the same things, but target specific to managers. So obviously, you're not going to reward a manager for doing something that they don't do, that only employees do. But for managers in my programs, let's say we have a component for them as well, and they would get recognized. Let's say it's supervisors or foremen on a construction site. They would get recognized for delivering presentations to their workforce around safety. Very often those toolbox talks, those tailgate meetings, if you will, are supposed to contain a safety element. When they do that and do it properly, I, as the boss of them, would recognize them for doing so. When they are proactive as well, when they decide to create presentations as it relates to safety, when they do something above and beyond and extend the training of their employees, without even being asked, I would again recognize and reward them. And any platform that we create certainly has the ability to communicate through the same web platform, but to communicate with managers and supervisors with messaging that's different than what the employee sees. Okay, so a supervisor might see a message that says, complete the implementation of the number one rated safety suggestion for last month. Get that done, whatever it might be. Put better lighting on the stairs, right? These types of things. Put up a barrier between the pile of rebar and the construction equipment. Complete the the mitigation of the best safety suggestion from last month, and you as the supervisor will earn 100 points. Whereas the messaging to the employee says, make a great safety suggestion and you can earn points, right? So similar program format, but obviously with different goals and objectives that relate more to the supervisor level. And I take it all the way up to the chain, at least up to through the management level, maybe stopping just short of national safety manager and proprietors and higher level people in the company. But anybody in those levels in between should get recognized.
Brian, thank you very much. We're into overtime, folks, so this does conclude today's webinar. And again, join me in thanking Brian Galonick for his presentation, as well as our sponsor, All-Star Incentive Marketing. Once again, as you exit today's webinar, please take a couple minutes to complete our survey. We strongly welcome detailed comments to help us serve you better in future webinars. If you have any additional questions or comments, don't hesitate to contact me, Dave Johnson, at johnsond@bnpmedia.com. Please visit webinars.ishn.com for the archive of Brian's presentation, as well as information about our upcoming webinars. Again, we certainly appreciate your time this afternoon or this morning and hope that you have found Brian's webinar to be a valuable experience. Thank you.